take care of the whole employee so that they are the most productive for those hours of the day, week, month, quarters that they are working for you, right? And I think that's the lens in which a lot of benefits are now going to be recasted. And by benefits, I mean everything that you do as an employer to support your employee is now going to be talked about in that concept.
Good morning, HR. I'm Mike Coffey, and this is the podcast where I talk to business leaders about bringing people together to create value for shareholders, customers, and the community. Please follow, rate, and review Good Morning HR on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. You can also find us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, or at goodmorninghr.com. In the wake of the Great Resignation, there's a lot of talk today about meeting employees where they are and customizing the employee experience. Many employers are wondering what that means and how we're supposed to get actual work done if we spend all day making sure every employee is riding a unicorn to work and living their best life from 9 to 5. Ravi Swaminathan is a seasoned technology executive with a passion for creating products with social impact. Ravi is the founder and CEO of TaskHuman, a real-time digital coaching platform that connects employees one-to-one with a global network of coaches. In April, Forbes published an article by Ravi entitled How to Meet Employees Where They Are and Provide Benefits That Matter. Welcome to Good Morning HR, Ravi.
Mike, thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
So, in the Forbes article, you promote the idea of work-life integration rather than work-life balance. Is there a difference there?
Yeah, we think so. We've got the privilege of serving a ton of employees of companies globally, big, small, medium businesses. And one thing that we realized that is worth talking about is this difference between work-life balance and work-life integration. So work-life balance is something I think a lot of people are familiar with as a term. It's the notion that when you come to work, you do X, and then you go back home, and as a person and a human being, you kind of have to balance both, because it's not that you can afford to shirk your responsibilities in one place or the other, right? And so all the conversation in the industry has been happening around work-life balance and how to best allow you to do your job, but at the same time, maybe allow you to have a life, right? And you see this in sort of the investment banking world, where people are overworked and unfortunately not a whole lot of life left for them, right? And then you see on the other side of things where, okay, maybe you're retired and you're not really going to work, but you have your life, and so it used to be one of those two things. But we think that that's a sort of a different way to frame up stuff, when in reality, for most of us, it's always been about work-life integration, right? And if I have a parent that is not doing well, I have to go take care of that parent, right? If I have to drop off my kids at 8 o'clock in the morning because that's when the school opens, you have to do that. So this notion of work-life integration, particularly in the context of what's happening now and in a post-COVID world, hopefully a post-COVID world, right, is this notion that as you're thinking about going to the office, working from home for a few days, or completely as a remote worker, or as somebody who's going to the office all the time, how do we best integrate both those aspects of work and life? Because neither of those are going away anytime soon. So it's better off that you figure out how to do both, as opposed to trying to do one or more of the other.
Well, and I think we've seen a lot of that during COVID with uh, schools shut down, daycare not available, parents working remote, or employers needing parents, thinking they needed parents to be working in the office, but the parents were just saying, "I can't do that. I've got kids, and there's no such thing as daycare right now. I don't want to send my child to COVID daycare." And so they're trying to work remote, and I think a lot of employers thought they were making temporary concessions for some of these things, and now a lot of them are waking up and finding, no, that's not what the employees are expecting.
Exactly. I mean, just to give you some examples, right? All of us, I think, can relate to these things from the past couple of years. When you're working from home, you're going to get that, doorbell rung on you, several times. You have to go and see who that is, right? If your car needs an oil change, I mean, you have to go do that at the time that you need to do it. And so this notion that, if it was okay for you to, in the past, before COVID, if it was okay for you to take a work call at home, right? In the post COVID world, it should be okay for you to take a personal call. Maybe it's a doctor's appointment at work, right? And so I think individually, nobody would argue with these constructs because we have to get both done. I think it's really amplified a lot in terms of how employers should look at work life integration post COVID, because now those boundaries are no longer there, right? It's not like you have to drive to work, between 8 to 5, and then come back home, and then it's your personal life that you do, after you come back home, right? So, regardless of where you're working or how you're working, now there is a clear recognition that you have to integrate both your work and personal life and balance it, or what we call work life integration, integrated in such a way that you're able to accomplish both. And that is the context of what you started and talking about, which is the Great Resignation, right? When you're not able to integrate both in an effective way that makes sense for your life, it is going to cause you to burn out, and it's going to cause you to reassess your priorities. And most people will never, at least those with any semblance of choice, will never assess more of work, right? And that's what's happening with with the Great Resignation, is that, as people assess, and if they're forced to choose one, they're going to choose their life, because that is obviously far more important than anything else. And so I think, to set the context of what you had talked about, right? How are employers supposed to think about this? Are they now responsible for your life as opposed to just the work part of your life? And we would argue, yeah, right? That is the big shift, is let's care for all of Mike, right? If I'm an employer, rather than just
Well, be
the eight
careful
to
what you
five
sign up
person of
for,
Mike,
buddy.
right? Yeah, exactly, right. And so that's what you're signing up for. And to put it further in context, right? When we had this person that interviewed with us. She's a rock star salesperson, and we happened to find her when she was about 6 months into her pregnancy, right? And unfortunately, a lot of these types of people are conditioned to think, man, what's going to happen in 3 months, right? Will this employer hire me because I'm pregnant, and they know I'm pregnant, right? And
Right.
our answer to this was, oh my God, right? I can't even believe that we're putting this candidate through this stuff, but it's real, because this is how people think, right? They think, and it worries them. And so for us,
Right.
we want to embrace that person and go, look, we're here for a 10, 15, 20-year relationship with you. It doesn't matter, if you're taking a few months off or whatever time off you need, as you have your kid, right? And so that's what we want to take the conversation to, as a society and as a set of companies, is really allow people to live their life and help them best integrate their work portion, so that by taking care of the whole person, when they are working, for those moments in a day or a week or however you measure their productivity, that they are able to give you their absolute best, right? So that's, I think, the conversation.
Well, what would you say to the employer then that says, okay, well, if they're not on the clock, or if they're not working at the hours where I can check in on them, how do I know that they're getting any work done? I mean, it sounds like that's going to eat my productivity up.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think we have to separate two things, right? You have the Elon Musks of the world who go, hey, if you don't show up to work, we'll just consider that you're not interested in your job, right? And I think obviously, he's accomplished a lot and has every right to say things like that. But at the same time, you recognize then, folks like Airbnb and TaskHuman who take the different approach, right? We actually don't even have an office, right? And because again, Elon Musk is actually assembling things, right? You have to show up in a place and you have to tighten up a bunch of screws and bolts and so on, and it's a different kind of job. So I'll comment more on the side of the knowledge worker, and then I'll offer a few thoughts from my past experience on the sort of side where you have to show up to a factory and get stuff done, because that's just the way you assemble things. On the knowledge worker side, it's become very clear, that you don't need to actually see a person doing a good job for them to do a good job, right? And so it's best when you measure their productivity by the amount of work that they get done. And this is a real conversation that we have in our company as well. Our company is completely remote, by the way. Always was. It wasn't a COVID thing. We just decided this is going to be a remote company. And so and our team members are all over the world, so we absolutely cannot be monitoring when somebody is working. Is that 8 o'clock in their time zone? Are they started work, right? And then 5 o'clock, they're probably not going to be around. So we just completely don't even ask that question, but we have a sense of, is that person, for their role and their experience and seniority and expectations, are they producing a quantum of work needed for the time period that we're measuring them? Now, the longer that time period can be, if you can take a monthly view, a weekly view, a quarterly view before judging somebody, then you're going to do well. If you take a, hey, today I didn't see you from 8 to 5, so you must be slacking off view, then yeah, if that's what your business is, if you need daily productivity metrics, you're probably not going to do well if people don't show up to the office. And even when they're showing up to the office, chances are you probably don't have a way to measure their hourly and daily productivity in a knowledge environment, right? Now, in a warehouse environment, yeah, if the warehouse, works and you're shipping X number of packages or you're building X number of things, you're going to need people to show up physically and measure their productivity by how many units shipped out their door, that hour, that week, that month, that day, right? So I think we can safely separate the conversation and create a set of benefits and create two separate ways of thinking about these two sets of workers. And it's not that one worker is more important than the other kind of worker, right? I don't think it should be concluded that the factory workers flexibility is less important than the knowledge workers' flexibility. They do different things. And so it can and should be measured in different ways. And so for knowledge workers, I do absolutely think that the longer the time frame that you can take and assess, the more flexibility it gives you and the employee, right? And so that's our viewpoint on why you should be able to measure productivity in other ways, in longer time periods than just simply 8 to 5.
Yeah, we were a fully in person company up until COVID, and went remote like with everybody else in March of 2020. And since then, um, that worked well. And I've I owned our office building, and I've sold that. And when we're staying remote, and like you, we've got employees in places we never thought we'd have employees before, because we can find the labor, and they're willing and eager to work. But we've got good metrics in place for both productivity and quality. But we've also got an amazing culture where everybody supports everybody. I mean, we use Zoom for our telephony and our chat and a lot of our internal communication. And I can drop into the different channels and see how this team is talking back and forth to each other. And hey, I've got to go give my feed my kid lunch. I'll be back in 15, no problem. And I see all the chat back and forth and how supportive they. And it really just makes me crazy proud for them, because a lot of them now have never and may never meet each other face to face, except through a camera or through chat, and just through Zoom. So how important is changing the culture if you've got that more rigid, managed by walking around looking over your shoulder to see how busy you are? How important is it to change that culture, and how would you do it if we're going to give employees this kind of flexibility?
Yeah, I think follow your sales team, right? Those of us that have actually run a pretty large sales team, I've run thousands of person sales teams, all of that stuff in my career. Um, if you've run a sales team at all, you never had the luxury of actually watching them in the same room and tapping on their shoulder, watching them do their work, right? So we don't even have to look far into our own past to know that many functions, even within companies that consider themselves, hey, you got to come to the office type of companies, never fully operated in every function that way. Never did, right? It's just that they weren't thinking about it this way. And so anybody that's run a sales team knows, you're going to have people in different territories all over the place, right? All over the US, all over the world. That's just the way it always was for you. So if you were a sales leader, you may get people together once in a few, once a few months, once a quarter, once a year, whatever it was, right? That was your life anyway. I think the rest of us just got too accustomed to what we were doing, whether you're in engineering or other functions. And then, you had to sit behind the veil of, oh, if I didn't come to the office, I would get stuff done. I wouldn't get stuff done, right? So I think, following that path, and like you said, Mike, I think it's really all about culture. Just embrace the remote culture part. Like you embrace the need for people to come in. And I don't think it's going to eliminate the need for people to ever meet each other. I think you can deploy your lack of office space probably in other ways, right? With the savings that you had, personally with your own office and not having to pay rent anymore, maybe that's used in a different way now to get the team once a quarter, once a year, so they can physically meet. And so I think you actually said it best. Culture is the best way to solve this particular problem. And by culture, yeah, I think we can separate that into two separate things, right? One is, what do people do and how do you measure the person's productivity? Take a long-term view of this, not just a daily view, right? Like, did I see that person today over a video call? If I did, then I feel good. If I didn't, you could still feel good. It's okay, they didn't disappear, and they didn't this completely not get anything done. But second is also support them in unique ways, right? Embrace their life for what you care about and all aspects of their life. And this goes to the example of the pregnant lady that we talked about, right? The reality is, when somebody is pregnant, it's obvious. But the reality is, if I have a dad or a mom who's elderly and I need to take care of them, that may not come across in an interview like a pregnancy does. So the reality is, people have their lives together with them, whether you as an interviewer or an employer can see it or not.
And let's take a quick break. Good Morning HR is brought to you by Imperative, premium background checks with fast and friendly service. For over 23 years, Imperative has helped risk-averse companies make well-informed decisions about the people they involve in their business. We are unique in the background screening market in that we don't put our clients at risk by cutting corners just to deliver a lower price. We are upfront and honest about what each of our background screening products is good for and what they're not. If you aren't certain about the quality of your background checks, I've published 6 questions that you should ask your background screening partner. These 6 questions will help you understand where your screening partner may be cutting corners. You can review all 6 questions at imperativeinfo.com/questions. If you're an HRCI or SHRM certified professional, this episode of Good Morning HR has been pre-approved for 1/2 hour of recertification credit. To obtain the recertification information, visit goodmorninghr.com and click on Research Credits. Then select episode 48 and enter the keyword Ravi. That's RAVI. And now back to my conversation with Ravi Swaminathan. Well, so we've talked about the flexibility of schedule and time and kind of working when it works for you, and balancing that with the team's needs, obviously, and all of that. I think that's a lot of managers assume it's one or the other. Either the employee gets to set their schedule or they work my schedule, rather than there being some cooperation between the team and the employee and figuring out how do we make all this work. But so listen, we get that. So beyond scheduling, though, you talked about well, I just was I moderated a panel conversation for the Fort Worth Chamber of Commerce a few weeks ago, and employees there, we were talking to is all business leaders, and they mentioned that employees want to bring their whole selves to work, and I kind of half jokingly said, they can bring their whole selves as long as they're bringing their productive self. That's what I'm paying for, is the productive side, and the rest of it, that's great. I don't care. what color your hair is. I don't care. You can look like the catfish that got away 100 times. I don't really care with all the pins in your face. What I need though is the productivity, right? And so, what other thing should an employer, if they, great, if it keeps this employee happy and productive, bring your whole self. But what should I be considering as far as ways to, and what are they looking for when they say I want to bring my whole self to work? What does that mean besides besides scheduling?
Yeah, I think I'm going to tweak a little bit of what you said to make this point, which is certainly I think employers care about the productivity side of things, but what if productivity was actually linked to keeping the employee happy in all the other things, right?
Right.
And so
And I
and
think that's
that's
the only
the
reason it
angle.
really matters ultimately. I
Exactly,
mean,
right? Exactly. And
right.
so take care of the whole employee so that, they are the most productive for those hours of the day, week, month, quarters that they are working for you, right? And I think that's the lens in which a lot of benefits are now going to be recasted. And by benefits, I mean everything that you do as an employer to support your employee is now, going to be talked about in that concept. I mean, it wasn't unusual for a lot of Silicon Valley. So we're based here in Silicon Valley. It wasn't unusual for Silicon Valley companies to have a foosball table, free peanuts, right? Obviously, why was that? And the answer is they thought, well, if I could keep you here longer, maybe I can get you to be more productive, right? Why does Facebook or did at least back in the day offer free laundry service and this and that, right? Google had nap pods. Why? It was because they wanted to kind of help you be more productive for those hours that you weren't taking a nap in one of their sanctioned nap pods, right? So I think that's actually a great lens in which you can start thinking about as an employer, and you should start thinking about as an employer is how can I help Mike, with fertility benefits if that's what that's what they think you want. How can I help Mike with his physical fitness? That's why you had the gym membership reimbursement that they used to give you. How can I help Mike with all these other aspects of his life? And in doing so, I'm going to get the most productive version of Mike, right? Or Ravi or Rob. And so I think that's really the key is yes, productivity at the end. If you just took unlimited vacation, right? A lot of companies have unlimited vacation. Let's say that, you took 364 days of vacation that year, you know, I think it's
Right.
safe to say you're probably not going to come back to the job, right? And so I think, but the key is you do all of those things, you provide all those benefits, and you care about all of Mike's life because then Mike in return is going to reward you as the most productive version of Mike. Right. And then if your viewpoint is okay, hey, I've seen Mike at his most productive and that's not good enough for me, then you're going to make the change. But you want to make sure that you're seeing Mike's full productivity, which honestly most companies, Mike, they're not seeing their employees full productive version because they're not supporting the rest of the employees lives, right? And so I think that's the big sea change you're going to see, and the employees know it, which is why it causes the great resignation and the stress and the burnout and all of this other stuff, right? So I think the framework and the conversation is what if you could support me or Mike or any employee with their physical fitness, their mental well-being, spiritual, emotional, their education, their all of these other things that they care about in their life. What if you could support that? Wouldn't you be therefore getting a version of Ravi or a Mike or a Rob that is the most loyal, that is the most productive, that's going to stay longer and appreciate all the things that you do? And that's the entire reason TaskHuman exists, is because we help companies take care of the employee in a way by bringing thousands of coaches instantly available in your pocket through our app and our interface that allows the employee to have a coach for physical fitness, have a coach for mental well-being, have a coach for leadership, have a coach for sales training, have a coach for this, have a coach for that, diet, nutrition, right? By surrounding you as an employee with coaches, we're helping you feel like a celebrity. Right now, you too can be Kim Kardashian. I mean, she probably has a lot of people helping her be her awesomest self, right? And so now you too, as an employee, I too, as an average human being, I can be supported by an army of people helping me live my best life. And because the company made it possible for me, I'm now going to reward the company with my best effort, right? When I'm showing up.
So that quality of that overall quality of life is what we're talking about, and you kind of started answering my next question. Then was because as the career HR guy who's always wondering about total cost of employment, and what's the total rewards cost, and what's my revenue per employee cost dollar. But I think you've started to, if we create a potpourri or a buffet of options and they can just select from them, we can, if it's all coming through the company, we can kind of start to measure direct cost against revenue generated
Yeah, the
by
ROI
that.
is really important. It's always, especially in HR, right? Because it's sort of a cost center. Everybody is and should be super sensitive to what they're spending, money on, right? Like, is free peanuts really getting me, Mike and Rob's loyalty, or is it better off that I'm spending that, on something else, right? That flashy gym that I built in the main office, are in a remote world, are people going to be showing up to that main office to use that gym, right? Or is it better served elsewhere? So ROI, is always typically, from what we see, one of these four things. One is, can I attract more awesome people to my company by claiming a set of benefits, right? And so if it can help me with recruiting talent, that's great. The second is retaining talent, right? If I'm 7-Eleven and my people are quitting at very high velocity, that's just the cost of replacement alone. If you can stave 10% of that, 20% of that, those are clear ROI numbers for why you should take care of your existing workforce and retain your workforce, right? So attrition slash retention is the second lens in which you evaluate these things. The third is engagement, right? Am I able to get the best out of Mike? And so, teamwork, productivity tools. I mean, why should you spend on Microsoft Office or Zoom or any of these things? It helps with better engagement, better teamwork, better camaraderie, collaboration, right? So that's the third lens, which is employee engagement while they are with the company. It tends to be a third factor in which to evaluate ROI, because a lack of engaged employee base, it's very well known through various studies, as you know, Mike, have been published through the years, of what the cost is of a disengaged workforce. And then the fourth, in the benefits world, tends to be around medical cost reduction, right? If I have just too many claims on people that are getting sick with diabetes, the cost of absenteeism, presenteeism, I mean, these things, along with the claims data that increases your medical insurance, is pretty easy to quantify. That's why over the last several years, you've seen a lot of companies focus on diabetes prevention slash or management. Also MSK, right? Musculoskeletal issues. Those things have been proven to have a pretty direct correlation to claims. And so if you invest on the preventive side, you're going to get back that money, in terms of lesser or lower claims on the back end, right? So these four things typically, so to recap, recruiting, right? Anything help with that. The second is retention slash attrition. The third is, can it benefit employee engagement? And the fourth is medical cost reduction. It's pretty easy to show ROI for any HR benefit, or any kind of L&D program that you want to launch for the betterment of your employees.
And one last, we're almost out of time, but I want to follow up. You mentioned with TaskHuman the kinds of coaches y'all have, and some of them were like sales training and probably whatever other kind of professional skills training somebody may need to do their job better. And I think that's where, as employers, when we think about something like any platform to train our employees or to give opportunities to our employees, it's like, okay, I'm going to invest this so that they can directly apply those skills on the job and make be more productive and make us more revenue per employee dollar. But you mentioned a number of things that were not really related to direct employee skills. Talk about those kinds of things.
Yeah, that's a great question. What we bring is a coaching platform that gives you one-on-one access to thousands of coaches in different walks of your life. in doing so, our hope is that, instead of you reading articles and videos, which you can get plenty on Google, or there are other apps that give you access to a lot of content, whether it's
Mhm.
LinkedIn Learning, or, that yoga video through Thrive Global, or, whatever it is, right? Instead of that, when we bring an army of real live human beings all available instantly via one-on-one, it completely changes the game in how you think about well-being, supporting efforts, for employees, things like that. So, in any of the four categories that we talked about of ROI, it starts to deliver tremendous ROI, because in the past, when you launch a LinkedIn, learning solution, or some kind of like weight loss app, or whatever it is, Calm, Headspace, right? These types of things. Again, I'm not poo-pooing any of the other awesome companies out there, right? Because every company has a reason for existence, and certainly I think HR should take a look at it. But when you do launch those things, what's happened is it gets pretty low employee engagement, right? On one of these metrics called employee engagement, you typically tend to get, single digit employee engagement, maybe 5-7% if it's EAP. So it wasn't that high. But when you
Because that's
introduce,
and that's because somebody that 5% of your employees wanted a yoga membership, or 5% of your employees wanted this particular emotional
exactly.
counseling or whatever. Okay, that makes
Exactly,
sense.
right.
Yeah.
And so because of that, because they were all spot solutions, anything that you launched, there was always a set of takers who went and did that, because that's what they cared about. But if you're a global company of any sort, or as you start to scale your user base and employee base, it becomes really tough to do one thing that everybody loves, unless that one thing is comprehensive, right? And that's really what TaskHuman felt, and that's why we exist as a company, is because whether you're a 21-year-old kid that's fresh out of college, or you're a 65-year-old that has different things on their mind, because we offer physical fitness, mental well-being, financial well-being, right? Which might be more important to somebody who's 65, about to retire, just has different things, right? All the way to spiritual, to leadership coaching, career coaching. So when you start to have sort of a comprehensive approach to an employee's life, right? We started this whole conversation by saying, what does work-life integration mean, right? It really means something different for the 21-year-old than it does for the 65-year-old. It could mean something different for a mom in the Netherlands as opposed to a dad in Kansas, right? And depending on your family situation. But if we can support all the employees with what they want at that stage in their life, and continue to support them as they grow and evolve, and just be the awesome human beings they are, then we've helped employers achieve a level of loyalty, value, engagement that leads to higher ability to attract better talent, ability to keep the talent there, right? As well as drive really high engagement, on a global population of people. Which is why, TaskHuman, the companies that roll out TaskHuman are seeing 60, 70% engagement from a pretty large global base of employees. That's pretty much unheard of, in the benefit space, because most benefits tend to see 5, 7, 8% engagement, right? And so that's the lens, right? Work life integration. Accept your employee for their whole life, help them live their best life. In doing so, you get what you want, which is obviously productivity, right? They're going to be the most productive, most loyal, most retained, most engaged employee base. And in return, everything fuels what all these different constituents want. The company gets what they want, the employee feels like, yes, I can have a life if I work for this company, and I don't have to do one or the other. I can be good at these multiple things, right? And then obviously companies like us, we get to serve and be useful to the employer and the employee.
Great. Well, so the takeaway is there's not don't look for that silver bullet or that one size fits all type. This is what we're going to do for you. Find a way, whether through TaskHuman or some other planning in your organization, to help employees guide you to where or guide themselves to the resources that they need, and find a way as an employer to support them in that with scheduling, but also in just making the other resources available.
Resources available for the whole person's life, right? As much as everybody knows, you only care about Ravi's 8 to 5 life, it's no longer fixed, right? So care about the all of Ravi's life. You support Ravi be, the best that he can be. And in return, you're going to get the awesomest version of Ravi, for the work period, right? The work effort and the work output that, he is producing.
And I think we got the most awesome version of Ravi today. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much, Mike, for having me. And it's been a pleasure to talk to your audience.
And thank you for listening. You can find episodes, show notes, and contact info for our guests at goodmorninghr.com or on Facebook, Instagram, or YouTube. And don't forget to follow us wherever you get your podcasts. Rob Upchurch is our technical producer, and I'm Mike Coffey. As always, don't hesitate to reach out if I can be of service to you personally or professionally. I'll see you next week, and until then, be well, do good, and keep your chin up.